Hi, welcome to Skill 21 of Algebra 2, Samples and Surveys. So we're going to talk about population and sample first. So our population would be the entire group of individuals we want information about. Our sample would be the subset of the population that we actually collect data from. So for example, your population could be like all Miss Claywell students, your sample could be her A1 students. In example 1, it says a furniture maker buys hardwood in large batches. The supplier is supposed to dry the wood before shipping. The furniture maker chooses 5 pieces of wood from the batch to check their moisture before they ship it. So our population here um, would be the whole batch, and our sample would be the 5 pieces that we actually test. So this is an introduction to sample and population. So what gets interesting is choosing our sample. And if you determine your sample carefully, the statistics for the sample can be used to make general conclusions about the larger population. So these are the types of ways that we can decide who gets picked and how they get picked. A convenient sample is we select members of a population who are conveniently and readily available. For example, if I stand in a mall and interview those who walk past, that's just like whoever's convenient. Self-selected is you select only members of the population who volunteer to be part of the study. Those are like people that are willing to answer questions from a phone survey. Continuing these methods, a systematic sample is when we order the population in some way and then select from it at regular intervals. So for example, if we chose every 4th person in an alphabetized list. A random samples are all members are equally likely to be chosen. You assign everyone a number and then you pick a number from a hat. So those are the 4 different ways that we can decide who is picked and how they get picked. So a newspaper wants to find out what percent of the city population favors property tax to raise money for local parks. And we're supposed to identify the sampling method in each situation. So remember, we have 4 sampling methods to choose from. A newspaper article on the tax increase invites readers to express their opinion in the newspaper's website. So if you want, you can go to the website and comment. So this is more of like an invites. The fact that they invite readers. So this is a self-selected sample. B is it interviews people leaving the city's largest park. So convenience sample. A surveyor calls the 50th person in a local phone book. So this would be a systematic. There's a system to it. So now we're going to talk about what a bias could be. So bias is a systematic error that occurs by the sample method. So a sample has bias when a part of the population is over or underrepresented. So this is the same situation as example 2. We're going to decide if these methods have bias. So remember, our goal is to see how people feel about paying more tax money for local parks. So if I asked people to go to a website to state their opinion, we need to think, does this have bias? So if we're asking people to go to a website and state their opinion, does this have bias? We would say it does have bias because those who take the time to visit the website likely have the strongest opinion. Opinions at the extremes, I should say opinions, sorry. So opinions at the extremes are likely to be represented. Like, you're not going to take the time to go to the website if you're indifferent. An interviewer records people leaving a local park. So this was a convenience sample. The biggest thing here that we have to think about is the fact that we're interviewing people near a park. So it does have bias because the interview location is near the park. So the sample likely will overrepresent the park supporters who favor the tax. And if we call a surveyor, if someone calls the 50th person in the phone book, this could be safe, but we would have to think about if there's a link between the people listed in the phone book and the people who pay the property taxes. So, for example, if I only called people in the area right next to the park, then there's going to be bias. So, we just talked about who we're going to interview and how we're going to select who we gather data from. Um, and now we're going to talk about sampling methods, which is the ways that we actually gather the data. So, we have 3 different ways that we can actually gather the data. Observational is when you measure observed data in a way that the sample members are not affected and don't have to change their habits or actions. Example would be a blood/health test on those that eat vegan and those that don't. Our second option to gather data is a controlled experiment, which is we divide samples into 2 groups or more. Some give treatment to some groups, but not to other groups. Compare the effects of the treatment group and the control group. For example, you water half the pots every day and don't water the other half the pots. The last way to gather data is to survey. So you'd ask each member of a sample set a set of questions. So for example, if you ask 3 ICS students 3 questions about their high school experience. So remember we have 4 study methods: observational, controlled, and survey. Now we're going to take the time to see which of, when we read these scenarios, if it's observational, controlled, or experiment. So researchers randomly chose 2 groups from 10 volunteers over a period of 8 weeks. One group ate ice cream before they went to bed, the other didn't. Um, so we have 2 groups. This would be a controlled experiment. Um, However, we have to answer the question, should the sample statistic be used to make a general conclusion? Because we only asked 10 people, the sample is too small for so small that the findings are unreliable as a general conclusion. For B, students in a science class record the height of a bean plants as they grow. This would be an observational study. The stats may provide a general conclusion about the growth rate of the bean plot, although soil, sun, water, etc. could be factors affecting the growth. So you would have to be careful that you removed a lot of variables to see that, to see what affected the growth if you wanted to make a statement about the general population. Part C, student council members asked every 10th student in the lunch line if they would like the cafeteria food. So we see that they asked members, so this would be a survey. However, this results are not reliable because the people waiting in the line are more likely to enjoy the cafeteria food than those that packed a lunch, and you're only asking people in the line. So during a 2008 Olympic game, a U.S. swimmer won more medals than any other swimmer in history. What sample method could we use to find the percent of students in a school who recognize the swimmer from a photograph? What is an example of a survey question that would likely yield questions that have no bias? So there's 2 parts to this. What is sampling method to find a percent of students who recognize the swimmer in the photograph? So the swimmer's Michael Phelps, by the way. So if we're looking at, oh, sorry. So the swimmer's Michael Phelps. So if we're looking at if we're looking at the percentage of students in school who recognize a swimmer, what is a method to find that? We could um, ask every 10th person entering the school and I want to know a survey question that would likely have no bias. So, for example, if I said, do you know who Michael Phelps is? People may say yes or no, and they may be wrong. But if we ask them, who is in this photo? If we ask them that, that will likely have no bias. Um, because then the interviewer, will get to see if they actually knew who the person was or not. It's not dependent on what they say. Or it's not dependent on if they think they know. So thank you for watching the video. That's all. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the unit.